welcome. It's the alphabet to you again. Good morning or good morrow. Different to a microphone. You might now. Thank you. Thanks for being here with me. Yeah. I gather you're on the hunt for some information or some proof or some evidence or some examples of some frame rates and some video games, maybe using hardware that you're considering buying, maybe using hardware that you've already got. Maybe you're in a competitive ecosystem just wondering what the grass is like on the other side of the fence. Most likely that one, statistically speaking, based on sales data and what many people seem to recommend in terms of when you buy a GPU for your Ninja PC. Which one do you go with? All right, so I'm going to fire up. This is a continuation of yesterday's video. I've turned on the HDR on the TV. I do have to apologise for the darkness of my footage yesterday. I mean, it was dark. So we'll be running Wukong. What we're going to do is we're firstly just going to run Hogwarts, just make sure the machine is working. Give an example of load times. I've put the new Wukong drivers on, beta drivers, which they're meant to drop DirectX 12 shader compilation for light sourcing. And Hogwarts is always, they say that as if it affects all DirectX 12 shader compilation regarding ray tracing. So Hogwarts since day one has had a very long preparing shaders screen on every single startup. If you change hardware, you actually do this screen twice. Once you do it off screen and then it starts it again, and it just adds quite a few minutes to a reboot process with this game, which can make it a bit of a nightmare for play testing. Anyway, anyone looking at the bottom of the screen, the reason why those numbers are up, things like micro stutter, which you'll see on a static screen like this, where it generates 1 frame a second and then 1,000, that's all over the place. But when I'm gaming, I don't want micro stutter, which is the third column along on the top. So from the left, we've got frame rate, frames per second. It's currently sitting at 20. It says minimum FPS, 99%. That's currently sitting at 3. Now that's probably the most interesting column that we'll be looking at in today's video. The 99th percent frame per second, right? I like to consider that what we call our 1% lows. And when we play with the Fluidmotion frame doubling technology, what I noticed across a few titles was that if the 1% low was set or didn't maintain 30 frames per second solid, i.e. if it dropped down to 29 or 28, 60 frames a second gaming, which is what most of our monitors will be set to, had all sorts of graphical issues and not ideal. So what I found was that when tuning, you need to tune for that 1% low being greater than 30. Now, it correlates with data that has been shared. Hardware Unboxed, when they were benchmarking Black Myth Wukong, the consensus with their review team, who have access to a range of hardware, all shared the concept that Fluidmotion frames is actually only any good once you get up to, they said about 80 frames a second. Now, what I noticed in a few of my titles was that when my 1% frame rate was sitting at 30, my main frame rate was sitting at generally 80. And any of the titles where I couldn't get my main frames per second up to 80, it was pretty consistent that my 1% low would be sitting just south of 30. So look, I'm hoping this video footage is a little bit brighter than yesterday's footage. Now that it's in HDR, it's probably the opposite of that. I've retweaked or tuned an OLED TV for the contrast range down low, which is technically the OLED's weakness, greatest weakness in the market against LCDs and competing platforms. The speed at which they ramp out of absolute black can lead to like crushed black. So it's complete opposite of like plasma, arguably. So whilst OLED is the best market alternative to, it's the best replacement for plasma, arguably. So if you want to watch TV, if you actually want to enjoy what you're watching, you don't display the spec sheet game and quote to everyone how bright your TV is or how many frames a second it can do or whatever. A nice color accurate last gen Panasonic plasma panel was pretty good, pretty hard to beat. And basically you needed a Panasonic OLED to really do it and maintain the same level of picture motion, or a top of the line Sony were the only 2 TVs that could really hold up against the last generation of the Panasonic plasmas. which are a real gift to consumers. But irrelevant. The point of my story is that my TV, having been retuned colours recently, I gave up a little bit of absolute brightness to improve the low down ramping out of absolute black, and it's a vastly better picture to look at. Really enjoy the movies where the cinematography is spot on and the cameras are tuned properly. They just look epic. But when I play a game like this, unlike the playback screen where everything just looks cut out black images with a little bit of light in the middle, no, all those shades I see, like, identify it as a three-dimensional shape level of gradation that makes it just look beautiful. Like right now, the left and right of me, I can see all the rock detail very subtly. It really is at that less than 5% margin out of absolute black, which you're meant to set for absolute extinguishing for. Anyway, this game is running quite well. So what was I talking about? Hardware Unboxed, Black Myth Wukong. The team were talking about 80 frames a second is the consistent minimum you really want when doing frame doubling techniques. And I concur that Hogwarts is the game where I've tuned my 99th percentile to not hit 30. I'm willing on map transition areas and a few areas in the game. I'm quite happy if the frame rate drops down just momentarily. I'm playing this game for hours and hours and hours. And there's the occasional judder. And like by occasional, I mean like so infrequent that you just don't care and you just get on with your game. But I mean that's ultimate. That really is. So look, it's an open world game. It's pretty hard to render. These are all ultra-ish settings. I say ish. I think the resolution is running at 1700. There's no FSR on. I find the FSR just kills it too much. You don't get that sharpness. And this game, if you can get the resolution up above 1600 res, being able to see the stitch work in fabrics and the things that come with that is just delicious. But it's personally for me, it's the graph. I find that there's none of the FSR techniques or any of the resolution scaling stuff maintains. Okay, so this is really a worst case area. You get a lot of grass. Any open world grass. Whiterun Valley out of Whiterun in Skyrim. It's one of the few areas you'll bomb your game other than Riften and the Tree Valley. But analog surfaces, very hard to do, very analog, very natural environments, I should say. So here is a good area. As I say, I tweak Hogwarts. I don't mind if the frame rate gets a little bit lower. That being said, I hadn't experienced this. Now that I have seen this, I'd be tempted to maybe change another setting. But my hotspot's under 100, which is normal. Most people don't even have the hotspot graph thing on, and so they just work off their normal GPU temp, which is easily 30 degrees less than that in Raytracing or compute titles. So yeah, look, I'm seeing how low this is here now. I didn't realise opening areas of the game like this. Plays pretty good. There is that momentary lag though on the wireless controller if I turn, that I don't get if I'm on a mouse. And it's probably my reason for preferring at low frame rate playing with a mouse rather than a lag-inducing wireless controller. I find anything that's inducing frame generation at 60 frames a second, the latencies that are added make the game make it less playable than 30 frames a second brute forced, where there's no latency. It just feels much quicker. But that being said, you can't play with a wireless controller at 30 frames a second, or when you tell it to move, there's a bit of latency for the controller to communicate with the computer, and then the computer at 30 frames a second takes a little bit longer to start the animation that is your moving. The total time it takes from when I turn left to when it starts rendering left is just too much. It makes me feel like there's a bit of a lag. I feel like I'm not in control of my character. I feel it's not precise. But at 30 frames a second on the mouse, it's precise. If I move the mouse anywhere on the screen, so I've got my mouse ball on, I could just turn now, right? And so the precision of being able to move to any particular direction and get there instantly is a lot quicker than a joystick, an analog stick. An analog stick, if you move it to the left, in order to move it to the right, you actually have to travel back over the zone that you've just moved when moving to the left before you can get to center, before you can then start moving right. If you're using a trackball, no, you just start rolling the trackball the other way and you start turning the other way. So there's a little trackball or a little mouse is a faster way to dial your commands in than a wireless controller. I don't really enjoy wireless controller gaming at less than 60 frames a second, and that's not with any frame gen involved. Although, that being said, with 16 milliseconds or less of frame gen, The Witcher 3 has been absolutely amazing with all settings absolutely maxed, including hairworks and ray tracing at greater than 60 frames a second. And that's what it comes down to, is agreeing with Hardware Unboxed, where they said that you basically need 80 frames a second if you're going to do frame doubling for it to still feel smooth. And whilst I don't necessarily agree with the brute force upper number, what I find is the consistent measurement that lines up every time is that 1% low. Now, it correlates because I believe my 1% low is sitting at 30 and above. I'm just about any game where I can lock 40 FPS at my upper when I'm going for 40 frames a second. And so this is brute forcing, running all settings at ultra, making it so that your machine just grinds to a halt. But there's such little variance in frame rate that if you can set it so that your frame rate lows are always above the minimum you need in order to never have any generational stutter or frame pacing issues or input latencies that you can actually see or feel, then your gaming experience is perfect. And you don't even get a sense of what frame rate you're running at. 30 frames a second feels quicker than 60 in many regards. And so if you don't have a frame rate counter up on the screen, unless the frame drops below 30 for a split second, you've got no concept of there being a lag or a latency. But look, the 30 FPS minimum on the 1% low is probably the only bit of knowledge that I'm trying to share across the video I did yesterday, the video today. The video yesterday, I ran through a whole bunch of videos. I'm really apologetic. I'm basically flying the same path as I probably did in yesterday's video. I don't think I've scrolled the brightness up on my phone anymore. If anything, it's a proof of concept for me to see if I'm capturing HDR with an enhanced brightness range. I did find my sunrises and sunsets were pretty bright and overblown in the footage from yesterday. That's why I have to run my EV on this phone camera app down a couple of points. It's a pro phone camera app. But a phone camera is useless. I can't run any of my online games because my phone is my modem. I'm not going to have it on generating more heat in the device. I need to have it drop frames when recording at 4K, 60 frames a second. So I've got cameras in the house with proper lenses that will do a much better job at color fidelity and picture sharpness when recording video footage. It is true that I generally prefer using my video card's inbuilt record feature. I don't use an external device. I could feed it to a laptop and use a range of hardware options so as I don't lose frame rate when recording. But I lose up to maybe 10% frame rate max when I'm recording with my video card. It's the same as running an overlay. I lose across quite a few API application programming interfaces. So DirectX 11, DirectX 12, Vulkan. There's a range of different APIs out there, and I think with some of them, I see a 30% drop in frame rates in my benchmarks in games like Dirt Rally. If I don't have the overlay up, I get like 180 frames rather than 130 frames as my peaks, and my averages are up 30%, and you just see the difference. So there is a reason why full screen gaming has been dropped from market. It's too performant. Everything now has to have overlays. Everything has to get in the way of full screen gaming, and those full screen gaming now is in the form of borderless full screen, i.e. technically as a window. So good if you want to multitask on your computer, good if you're doing multiple things, but if you're just trying to brute force games and make them run the best they can do, the Windows ecosystem is an atrocious place for getting any performance out of your gaming hardware. Probably takes a little bit of the fun out of the hobby, but it just depends. Depends how much value you need to get out of your video card investment. But what I'll do in a lot of this, and I hope the camera I'm recording to is bright enough to see all the graphs down below, I generally fly at a height where the game world below me has to render it ultra detailed with all the grass blades, but I also then get the maximum distance out to the horizon. Now, it doesn't look very impressive because I'm not flying close enough to the ground for us to actually see the individual grass blades, but I just know from a benchmarking perspective that it's just the way to crunch the computer to make it run really poorly. Now, arguments, what are the weaknesses in my testing? Okay, maybe I need to use a faster brew. A lot of the benchmark testing of The Witcher, going back quite a few years ago when everyone was desperate to try to achieve 60 frames a second minimum and solid when running through the city on their horse with everything ultra. Now, I could do it. I was running 2 video cards, essentially a Crossfire, or what used to be called an FLI type profile. And I could brute force 60 frames a second in The Witcher so easily and just sit power. That was an incredible feat to do. But it was finding an area, and so where a lot of people's machines would fall apart would be the texture streaming, and you could really load those systems up to be intense if you can travel faster across the map. And that's where Hogwarts as an open world RPG test on the simple basis that you can get airborne is a challenge that most other open world RPGs just never have to deal with. And so, as a technical test for your machine, I can't find one at the moment that loads all the systems or is capable of loading all the systems anywhere near as much as this game can. But sadly, the two playtests I've done, recording footage in the last few days, so I just went over an area transition change and my FPS dropped. And if anyone watched yesterday's footage, they'll know that I'm on a 10-year-old Samsung Evo drive. The Evos are their budget drives with they don't have very good controller chips in them, which basically puts the work on the CPU in a benchmark. When you're doing desktop productivity, you won't see any difference between an Evo drive and a Pro drive, but when you're playing a game at full pelt and your CPU is fully loaded, you haven't got any extra CPU headroom to give towards a cheap or a budget solid-state drive doing its essential drive or data decompression. So the Pro drives, when it comes to gaming in CPU limited situations or CPU loaded situations, can make massive frame rate differences. Certainly to the frame rate lows, and certainly in games with texture streaming, like this one. So look, I do like settings to break. So anyway, Black Myth Wukong, as benchmarked by Hardware Unboxed, they came up with a lot of recommendations. They kind of set the cutoff line so that the top 6 cards in their playability estimations were all team green. Now, there's a couple of caveats to that. You've got to read the notes that go with the video in order to understand what's going on. So first and foremost, it's software lumen. And once the ray tracing is turned off, the software lumen isn't using the AMD pathways. And the Black Myth Wukong patch from AMD dropped yesterday morning in the beta branches. And there was so many optimizations for the game, especially with regards to ray tracing. So I found with ray tracing on medium, and again, Hardware Unboxed said that they didn't see any visual setting differences between medium and low. If you're going to have the performance hit of medium, you might as well see the graphics of medium. So I set the ray tracing to medium, and I found with a mixture of cinematic, which is ultra quality, and the one step below that, settings, I was actually able to find a perfect mix for Wukong, where it looked like I was going to sit on 60 frames as my minimum frame rate using Fluidmotion. But in order to do that, I would need to get my 1% low at 30. And having done that in The Witcher and seen it, and if I change my Hogwarts settings, I can make it in Hogwarts too, but I opt for the occasional frame clink, because generally if I'm not flying out of my blue, but if I'm just walking around, just enjoying combat, just enjoying like loading in vistas at normal speed so that my machine isn't bogged down, my frame rate's usually just flawlessly perfect, and it's very, very fun. Very, very incredible title to play. And in part just because you can, fully open world. Now, that did all right. I expected there was going to be a bit of a load. Just because I went from an outdoor environment to an indoor environment, but now it seemed to be on top of it. Oh, yeah, okay. So can we go through another load section? This one's such a short gap between them. Wow, it was on top of it. Okay, so it's doing pretty well. Again, this is the Evo 850. It's, custom Lumen. Which one's that one? That one. Right, so it took a moment. I saw the 1% low bomb down at 40. I do think that was in the back end. It was probably, my CPU was really hammering hard with the Evo. But it might just be because I was panning the camera. Motion is where yep, there we go. I can drop it down to the same. So it seems like I can hit 20 frames low, but there's a few points of light in here, just a few. And it's clearly a room that's not been built for anybody to need, this to be cutscenes. This isn't possibly a big fight room where you need the fastest frame rate for an action sequence. Oh, either those doors are locked shut, which I don't think's a thing. Okay, yeah, so you can see if it's got a load of more complex area, this 10-year-old SSD, which is the worst SSD I've ever owned in my life, it can get caught out. I recall moving the game to the drive as testing. I was trying to create worst-case scenarios in the game. My typical NVMe drives would be 4 times more performant, and especially in things like 4K small file reading stuff. But look, it's not about my system. I really want people to know this is you can't get a more held back system. All these benchmarkers and people on the internet, and because they've got a few followers, they've got the money to go out and buy the latest and greatest. And so they all run 4090 NVIDIAs. They all run, you know, crazy fast CPUs and the best motherboards and everything. This machine cost me $450, probably nearly 8 years ago. I bought it secondhand. You know, I had to add a video card to it. I've technically added a solid-state drive to it because my 8-year-old NVMe, which had been given to me by a client, I still have to it, and I was given one of the first-gen NVMe drives. So it might have been small, but it was really, really quick. Anyway, I used to love using that. But I gave it to a nephew as a system disk, you know, machine I built for him. But I've been missing it ever since. I really have. And I do actually have one of the super fast NVMe's. Right? So what I'm playing on would barely push 500 megabytes per second. As an SSD, that's pretty poor. But even then, it only achieves that if the CPU is fully active and involved in the process. So yeah, it's not really ideal. Well, okay, there's a little bit of a quick test. So that was an indoor becoming an outdoor environment. I just sort of stepped over the threshold. There was a single, maybe 2 or 3 frames of jank. I don't know. I actually saw the judder on the screen. Didn't do it the second time. But look, it's an incredibly impressive title. It's very hard to render graphics and games at this level of motion and fidelity. I don't think I can use my broom. Yeah. Oh, I can. I thought most of those walkways in Hogwarts, where you technically weren't outside of the school, didn't allow you to do that. All right, so look, I'm just going to fly down here. Let's just find a little grassy embankment. Let's just get now that the sun's starting to come up, we can actually see the ground detail. Let's have a look. All right, so this is Hogwarts. This is running at about 1700 res. You can see the video card. The GPU utilization is at 97, 98%. Now that's not 99%. There's a difference between 99 and 98%. 99%, because it doesn't render 3 digits in that column. 99% can equal 100%. Can't see a difference between 99 and 100, right? It just says the same number. 98%, right? That means it's not at 100%. Yeah, I know that's simple. That's math we were told in year 3 or whatever at school, right? It's simple understanding what numbers mean. But when we understand what our video card's doing, there is a big difference between something sitting on 99 and not varying versus something that sits on 99. And even if just occasionally it says 98, right? That means that it's very different to 99 unvarying. And so, yeah, look, I'm seeing my hotspot temp vary by an easy 10 degrees. It's having a very easy time of doing what it's doing. It's got headroom to peak up. My peak power draw can easily shoot up 280 watts, 230, 300 watts, depending. But most of the time I tweak my games to run at 180 watts to 200, with 210, 220 peaks under extremely loaded situations, just to give it some headroom. So now that we've got some actual light running across the map, it just looks prettier. But you can see the extra sharpness in the fidelity between the branches. If I was using actual cameras, the color fidelity would be amazing. I could record the HDR beautifully. But these are just proof of concept videos for the net. Anyway, I only wanted to make a 15-minute video today. I really just want to jump in and out of Black Myth Wukong. But this little valley I'm running across here now, when I first had the game running, I probably played it for 20 hours with all ultra settings and quite high resolution. And then I hit this hill, and just like the Whiterun Valley in Skyrim, where all of a sudden you're rendering heaps of grass, it just bombed down. I had a spider fight here on the hill, and it must have been over an area transition. I went, right, that's it. I'm dropping the resolution a notch. I'm no longer am I putting up with an inferior frame rate. You know, there's enough action in this game for it to just be amazing. But I think people need to understand it's an open world RPG. It's one of the prettiest that exists, one of the hardest to make your machine render it and do it beautifully. This notion of fluid motion frames and taking the game from a solid lock 30, which is how I was brute forcing it, and being able to play it at 60 on a controller and for it to feel amazing, absolutely amazing. As good as it felt at 30 locked brute force on my mouse, which nobody but me has ever experienced that, I suppose. People just have to take my word for it that it's good, and have, you know, with no experience of my history and not knowing if I've ever gamed at 200 hertz and have owned like tons of dual video card solutions and just always brute forced and overclocked and done crazy high refresh rate gaming and are super sensitive to even if my anisotropic filtering is knocked down a notch. Oh, no, that's not anti-aliasing. No, I'm talking about my textures are at a diagonal angle into the screen. If I'm if they're becoming soft, they're not clear and sharp for all the high-res textures I'm loading. I want to see them in action. Right? I know what settings to set. I know how hard bloody grass can be in an open world game. And so tweaking game that run well is a byproduct of decades of overclocking. Right? And as someone that ran Deus Ex on day one of launch, I think I had a Matrix card. I had a monitor that went up to like 1200 resolution. This is 3:2 ratio, 4:3 ratio, sorry. The pan and scan ratio as we know it in the TV market. But yeah, 1200 by 1024 res in the Witcher on a Matrix card, it was, I think that at one point I set everything to ultra, including reflections. And I was in the foyer of the home building, and there was a marble floor, and it was reflecting the wall. It was like the 90s. It was like, I think it was like a minute or 3 minutes between frames. With everything set to ultra. Yeah, okay, I tweaked it down after that. But yeah, the Matrix cards, just back of the analog monitor days, they're 2D fidelity or their color fidelity, which is a cut above the ATI, which were a clear cut above the NVIDIA cards for color accuracy, color fidelity on the analog cables. And as someone that would play, because you put a Voodoo card in your machine, it would have to use a loop cable to bounce out. And so idiots like myself that would put like an Apocalypse 5D, which was a Singlabs 6000, like the best 2D chip you could get, paired with a great 3D chip in the form of a Power VR card. It came with a Wipeout demo. It's pretty fun. But yeah, in order to have market compatibility, because nothing supported Power VR, you had your two Voodoo cards, your SLI. You'd easily wind up in Windows 98 second edition when you could add two video cards for multi-PC gaming. I had PCs with technically five video cards in them, with actual dual core processor, a dual core a dual processor, I should say, Pentium 2 300, with two physical slot one, or whatever the slot was called back then, big giant CPUs plugged in. What was that? Dell. Anyway, ex-government hardware. Still love it. Used to get like $4,000, $5,000, $8,000 computers for a couple $100, and gee, that was stable. I recall rebooting Windows once every 6 months, and generally if I moved house, it would be the first time I'd have to shut the Windows down. This is back in Windows XP days, and it just shows you that a better built motherboard, a better CPU, and everything is running flawlessly. Things like ECC RAM or just whatever. Just these so-called not very stable operating systems are just flawlessly stable. And so that's what I tweak for. I always aim. I buy the cheapest product in the top lineup is typically what I'll aim for in all my TV purchases or AMP purchases or just anything. You know, I don't want to pay for the top dollar part, but I do want the top dollar quality. I'm willing to buy the smallest TV in the Pro lineup because that's what it takes to get the best picture quality, etc. But anyway, neither here nor there. The problem is, I find this game so addictive now that it runs so fluidly. Right? There's no FSR on. Resolution is high. This game just looks amazing, and I can't stop playing it. Right? And I can see my phone screen. It's nowhere near as bright as it looks on my screen. It looks about 20% brighter on my screen, maybe 30% brighter versus the phone screen. But I get it. It's the bright points are overexposed on the phone already, based on yesterday's videos. So I didn't want to risk raising the meter just yet. I just wanted to try out the HDR mode and see if that fixed up yesterday's issues. But look, there was about to be a sunrise in this game. I'm so sorry I'm not going to stick it out a bit further. I am just going to quit because I can't imagine anyone wants to see me play an old game. So Black Myth Wukong tech demo is probably the one to run right now. I'm just trying to think the easiest place for me to find it. It's probably on my home screen here because I will have been firing it up just last night. All right, so let's give it a shot. All right. So yeah, look, my recommendation with the frame gen, the Fluidmotion Frames 2 tech, is it is really good, but you've got to get that 1% low above 30. Other people identify that as you basically want an average of 80 frames a second. Now, I do like the games that have a 40 frames per second mode because it makes it really easy to basically go VSync and frame rate lock and a whole bunch of things, and just make it so that your video card doesn't render 800 frames a second. I've got tons of games, but if I don't put limits on, especially with the way I overclock, if I turn on just a menu, reset my Windows machine, because the hotspot of my GPU will have hit 117 degrees Celsius inside of 2 seconds of a menu coming up. But those same settings with a frame rate limit of 60 allow the video card to just peak up and brute force absolutely whatever's thrown at it, so that it doesn't miss a frame. So look, obviously get to know your equipment. Get, your level of comfort with your machine is what it comes down to. The purpose of these videos is just to say, look, if you tweak your games, drop a setting or two so that your 1% lows are above 30, just turning on Fluidmotion is basically enough to get by and be done. So look, I'll run the benchmark. I don't know what settings are currently running. At the end of the benchmark, it'll tell us what settings are running, and then we'll go through and we'll do the two things we need to do. One is we'll set it to its recommended settings, which I thought was really good. From memory, it spat out 60 frames a second, or the 1% low was 30, and but it didn't have any ray tracing. But it was pretty. But what I noticed is the default settings didn't turn any FSR on. I couldn't find, because there's no settings in the FSR or the downscale technology, it looks like it's set to performance level and not quality. I've never run performance, I've always run quality, so that the sharpening of the frame still looks a bit closer to settings you actually want to run. Okay, so I must have just, this is me cranking it for a cinematic pass. You couldn't play this if there was frame generate. I'm guessing there's Fluidmotion frames on right now. So I was just trying to do a cinematic pass. I just wanted to see what it would look like if I took a mixture of ultra and high settings. And I think I turned anti-aliasing off, basically altogether, or ran it really low, because I hadn't seen a single jaggy in any of the passes, and it just made no sense to try to brute force it at 4K with high levels of anti-aliasing. So there's a lot of people out there who probably aren't configuring the settings outside of one preset. They're not kind of going, oh look, I can get away with shadows at medium, and this setting looks okay at this setting here, and blah 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 blah. Right? Like, once you know your game, once you know how many sequences in the game have a draw distance that pushes out to the horizon, and if it's only 3 sequences in the entire game, and say for example it's a brawler game where all your combat target, your focus points are immediately around you, like a couple of meters around you. Like with a gun game, you might be aiming at targets in the distance, and so your resolution might matter. Okay, so here, the graph fidelity on all of the downscale methods looked really bad and would turn. So that there is me trying to combat that, and I'd say I've done better. There's a bit of a mixture there. I'm guessing I'm at 1700 res, and there is an FSR on, but we'll find out in a moment. So, yeah, look, if the game world, drawing out to the distance isn't needed, you might not want that. I personally like that. I like seeing fidelity as far as I can see. If I stop in an open world game on a run to the top of a mountain and just want to breathe in the area around me, I will do that. But for me, I don't play games for the trophies. A lot of these games for me are just what I consider, the partner and I, we sit there and we call them medieval walking simulators. Case in point, when Kingdom Come Deliverance first came out, we would alternate each day. Who would sit on the floor and get the massage and play Henry, the character in Kingdom Come Deliverance, and who would sit behind and just get to watch and just be the passenger on today's medieval walk, And so it'd just be about picking mushrooms in the forest and just living life as a peasant. Right, so frame generation was off, but FSR was on. Ray tracing I'd managed to get up at medium, so it was technically on. I'd gone the motion blur off, but cinematic is the top level. So we've done textures, hair, and vegetation at cinematic. Shadows I dropped to high. Post-processing medium and anti-aliasing low. But again, I hadn't done enough benchmark runs to see if they were making differences. Because the benchmark didn't have any areas with a view distance I thought that was excessive, I couldn't see how very high wouldn't cover it. And this is it, the super scaling resolution. The game defaulted to 50, and I wanted to start playing with that until I could start to see a level of sharpness. So I dropped the res right down. I do think the next level up resolution without an FSR, maybe slightly different settings, looked substantially better. But the nice thing about this benchmark, right, is if you come down to history, Paducah. This is so cool. I actually really like this benchmark. It's quick to run. It's consistent in the output results. They vary maybe by a frame from run to run. You can come back and you can look at your previous runs. Oh, it only keeps 5 of them. No! So all my good runs. Oh, I had tons of these with average frame rates at 60. Dear. Oh, that's a shame. One of these will show my tweak settings. I just assumed that my tweak settings were being remembered. Okay, so this one here. This one here is pretty solid. Yeah, this must have been the good one. Okay, it had frame gen on. But the minimum was 30. Yep, this is it. This is perfect. This is the one, right? Anybody out there that wants to know how to set your Wukong for a Series 6000 chip AMD, I would go with these settings. Borderless, a whole bunch of cinematics, vegetation, hair, texture, motion blur at weak or off. That can be the preference. People saying that the character, the motion blur in this game is horrible. I think maybe when the camera's panning around them if you're looking. But motion blur off is probably recommended. I can go either way. It depends on the art team and the assets and how the game was built in terms of whether the game leans on it and needs it. Or if the motion blur covers major issues in other aspects of the graphics engine, which in some engines, some games is a thing. But from what I'm hearing on this game, maybe motion blur off would be thing. So full ray tracing. So I've gone with medium. Other people in reviewing this game have said, depending on where you sit on the fence of if ray tracing is good for the market or bad for it, they said in this game you'll find plenty of examples of each. You'll find plenty of examples of traditional rasterization type levels of pre-baked lighting and lighting in the old school methods where it just looks exceptional and no different from the ray tracing method. And then a couple of areas in the game where you're like, see, here are the examples of what the difference of path sourcing the light through a scene will actually do. So people say in this title, you'll find examples both ways of what works. So with super resolution of 50 at 1700, I think that FSR, I think this one was the non-blocky grass when panning the camera with the camera banking at about a 15 or 20 degree angle, right? To say that none of the interpretive techniques could do anything. It's a great benchmark for a worst case scenario. But yeah, I just found that shadow quality high, post effect quality can depend on your CPU primarily, but it did say that that's a pretty big hitter. Any aliasing, I'd probably even drop that another step because you just don't see pixels anywhere. But it can depend. I don't know if that combines with the FSR and the resolution to give you your alternate output. I have a feeling turning that off would improve the others substantially because there's a lot more headroom available for the actual calculation of frames I want to see. And the aliasing used to always be the setting you would only turn up if you needed it. You'd only turn it up if you had frame rate to burn. If all your other settings cranked, gave you what you needed, then you turn down the aliasing up. And a couple of years ago, it became vogue to render everything at 4K because that was a box-selling feature of console gaming, especially. And then everybody started building their game worlds at a much lower resolution, just so that the technical output to the screen would be 4K. But magically, you all of a sudden needed to turn on the aliasing on just to smooth out like cheap jaggies. Anyway, let's go settings. We're just going to go graphics. I'm going to go auto default. Right, so it goes FSR on with frame gen. Holy shit, super res 50. Okay, it's left the ray tracing on. When you go auto default, by default it leaves ray tracing off. And for me, it set everything else here to very high. So I don't think this is going to run very well. I think those default settings were 60, 100% without the ray tracing. So I highly doubt if the ray tracing can be turned on, it's going to maintain anything. So look, it's not really much purpose to run the Black Myth Wukong stuff if I haven't got anything intelligent to say with regards to it. Although the 99th percentile there is showing 59, is showing above 60, so these settings are looking pretty good so far. Yeah, there they've dropped. So yeah, this would probably be unplayable. This would be as playable as Hogwarts. But because Hogwarts isn't a fast-paced action game, well, maybe. Not quite at the same level this game is. Although, these settings, I've seen a bit of frame tearing there. Anyway, anyone's saying it's nobody will be playing with ray tracing in this game, I completely disagree. Right, the actual sharpness of the screen is still way too much. The anti-aliasing is still way too high. So it would be really easy to tweak a bunch of settings so that the 99 FPS, the 1% low, is above 30, and then simply turning on the frame doubling. And it would allow the responsiveness, it would allow you to play on a controller and feel like the game is responsive, whilst, and locking your VSync and whatever else, whilst experiencing quite a nice game. Based on The Witcher and Hogwarts in the last couple of days. And I did find that the frame doubling in both those games, if I wasn't sitting at the top frame rate of 80, or the reality that the consistent experience for me, that is quite sharp. That looks better than so many runs where that would just turn to, felt like 800 lines of resolution jank. It literally felt like 500 lines of resolution. I'd never seen a VCD look that bad when it would pan. And that corner there was just 3 spots in the test where the pixel rate would just drop right down. But look, the problem with frame gen is in a pre-render benchmark like this, you can't see the latencies, you can't feel how bad it feels. So I can see these settings are a little bit too much. There's no doubt about that. But with the ray tracing off, this is 60 FPS with 99th percentiles above 30, perfect for frame doubling. And that's with everything set to very high. I did find last night a mixture of cinematic settings with a higher resolution and more pixels under duress moments where it was, where it was panning the camera with a slight camber or angle to it. Things that just destroy predictive frame gen. And I did find settings where this game could easily sit at what would be very playable frame rates, feel like an arcade game, and just be amazing. So certainly a game that's going to be worth tweaking, certainly a game that a few driver updates will probably clamber back a little bit. And just an intelligent, approaching this engine specifically, this game specifically, not taking attitudes from other games, such as I need to have anti-aliasing on for it to not look shite. Will probably get you a much better gaming experience, would be my take on that. So anyway, the Wukong, I'm going to add that to my rundown. I'm doing a fairly short video today. I just need to proof the HDR recording. I just need to proof I'm using a different microphone. Yesterday's microphone was a little bit, I think it sort of faded in and faded out between being clear and not. And so I just thought I'd try something different today. Different recording method, arguably. Different microphone. Different attitude, I guess, from me. I don't know. Make it a short video. But look, I did find a couple of games. As I said, I'm going to add to future testing things like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, because I didn't realise that a 6000 series card brute forcing this game with everything ultra and no FSR is the absolute limits of the 6000 series at this moment in time. So it's probably a great game to show driver evolution and any potential frame rate increases that come with it, because at the moment, for me to render at 60 frames a second, my fans are just running, I'm running about 8 degrees hotter than I want to. My power consumption is up way higher than I want to. And I forgot it had a shader compile. Well, let's see if my DirectX 12 ray tracing shaders are equipped. I don't think there's ray tracing in this game. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it's improved. Wonder what. Okay, no, technically, sorry, my apologies. I have reinstalled display drivers. Yes, that's right. I put beta drivers on last night right before I went to bed. So the game itself is probably freaking out. I know with Hogwarts, anytime it discovers there's been any hardware change, it likes to redo the shaders. It could be fair, it could be if a shader needs to be built. I experienced this with Arc. The shaders were built with a 4K. I was rendering at 4K. It did a shader pass. It generated all the shaders based on that resolution, and then I found my in-game frame rate wasn't perfect and dropped it. And then I found that a lot of the pre-calculated shaders weren't matched then to the in-game assets I was currently running. And I was winding up with all sorts of issues where corona of lights would be shining around trees, and a tree would just be cut out of the light because it wasn't lining up with the actual tree trunk near it. Anyway, I'm not describing this very well, but to say I was seeing issues Right? And that's what we're meant to do, is test it. So we're meant to go and go, look, it's one thing to say I can benchmark this, but you've got to watch it, right? Because if you watch it and it's the fidelity, if it's not enjoyable to watch. Oh, there we go, that texture streaming. Oh. Again, a lot of my games for texture streaming I intentionally put on really bad drives. I'm a techie from way back when. It's my job to benchmark. Oh, damn, quick game. So I made the error yesterday. I portaled back to town. The town was really pretty. And then I portaled. The portal remained up, but I took the portal back to the dungeon and it put me in a bottom room that I couldn't get out of. And I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. So I've done all my progress in this game on the console. And so I'm kind of just playing on PC just just purely for tech reasons. I should give it at least a finished loading. I played this for hours last night. I couldn't stop playing it because it was perfect and no glitching whatsoever. And now all I'm seeing is just glitch. It's just jerky as hell. So I really should give it a minute or two. That's not a door. But the reason I'm going to add this to testing now is that I did notice, see 107 degrees, 104. I should probably focus on the fighting. Need someone to shoot in order to. I'm not going to get him. Right. So, but yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was so smooth. My FPS lows weren't dropping. As far as I could see, I wasn't having any issues in the game. No glitches, nothing. It was pretty nice. I'd actually got to the point of really enjoying it, and but sadly couldn't stop playing. And even though the fans were just jet engineering like they are right now, it's not running my cool and quiet profile, which 40 megahertz less speed. You don't notice any difference in frame rate, but the machine just runs so much quieter. And dare I say, the jank in this game is because I'm running right at the edge of my capabilities. So yeah, look, it's looking okay. But yeah, I've not been picking up any weapons. Like I literally was just playing last night, just on the, oh my lord, this game is so fun. Just keep playing. I knew I was having fun when I started to realise in order to do any of the sections I was doing, I was having to play like a pro. I was having to double back and run around and pop up in different bits of the map to where people were expecting me. And I was literally, there's a dot per inch adjuster on the side of my mouse, and it's the first time in 5 years I've been playing a game where I've gone, shit, I need to use my DPI adjuster. I need, when I'm doing fine shooting like I'm not doing right now, I need to be able to headshot people. And I just had to play for another half an hour, and then I wasn't getting fed up with it. I was having a lot of fun, but the AI in the fights isn't as good as the Outer Worlds. Space's Choice, Outer Worlds. The AI in the fights are not as good. They're kind of like playing Killzone Mercenary on a PlayStation Vita, where you just sit there going, man, this feels like I'm playing Battlefield against humans. How is the AI this good? When a game's got good AI, you just want to play it. Anyway, last night I was just to the point of just trying to test this game and just seeing how easy it is for it to render 4K 60 and Ultra, and finding out that no, it requires my machine at the absolute limit to do it. And but it could. I was like, yeah, this is cool. Anyway, I have to do it for a couple of hours just out of pure addictiveness, because it was so fun to play, because it was giving me a real challenge. I went into the menus, and I literally said to myself, if it's not set to hard, that's it, I'm quitting. I can't, how am I this shit a player? I don't get it. And then it was like, oh no, it's set to intense, and at the moment, because the game hasn't been finished, there is no harder difficulty level. And I was like, oh, okay, well that fits. Yeah, cool. That's why I've been having to double back and having to use my DPI adjuster on my mouse to do the headshots to get the criticals in order to take enemies down. And I mean, I shouldn't be playing with games from the start of the weapons from the start of the game. I should be using like ammo and shields that have been upgraded by now. Because I just played for 4 hours last night, didn't pick anything up other than like the 2 quest objects I needed to make progress. Anyway, long rant and rave, not really achieving anything. In future, I'll have this game set to an open world zone, not stuck in a dungeon, doing the same fight over and over again. Because, I'm not prepared to give it my full concentration right now. Oh, maybe. I just feel it's a delay, but each time I don't do it, and then I'm stuck in here, I have to do it again. It's a longer delay. So it probably makes sense to do it right the first time. Even if people don't understand how difficult that might be, that's fine. Okay, so he's got shields. Right, so let's just go clear you out. Enjoy this, buddy. No, those shields still don't do him. If he hits me, I'm dead. If I hit him and get him, I win. Get him. But yeah, a lot of fun. And at 4K, being able to shoot eyeballs on people is kind of fun. Look, I'm playing on a wireless trackball. The DPI on this isn't particularly anything special. Certainly not a gaming tool by anyone's standards. The polling rate of it, etc., is nothing special. Someone that's always had razors and like Death Adders and all the good gaming mice going back to $200 Microsoft mice in the 90s, just a standard affair. Games like Diablo that clock you up a million clicks on them. Show the longevity and the build quality of them. It's fantastic. Not something we get necessarily in the modern world. But yeah, playing on a cheaper little Logitech trackball, it's half price at a local office workshop one day when I was walking past it, and I went, oh, cool, I'm going to give that a shot. And it's been the best game-changing, most fun I've ever had. So this is a Bluetooth keyboard on my lap. I use a range of things as a keyboard component when playing a game like this. But the trackball, in terms of precision, being able to shoot eyeballs out of sockets and just get anywhere on the screen super quickly. That's going back to the console version of a shooter game like this, very difficult to consider. Anyway, open world segments is what I wanted to do. These are still instant zones. It's not really a true open world game. But go somewhere where the draw distance is a little bit better. Everything's set to insane levels of rendering. The hotspot sitting up just shy of 110. At 110, it puts the brakes on massively. It chokes the absolute top speed. I'm drawing 280 watts of power for a card that really likes to draw about 250. This is fully loaded. So I like this game. This game is now going to be added to my testing suites because any future improvements in drivers that up frame rate will essentially allow me to drop my hotspot right now, or drop my temperature, or drop my fans quieter. Probably use a bit less GPU power to render my nice locked 60. But dare I say it's not quite locked. Who knows? 99th percentile being just below 60 tells me that maybe it's a little bit to judge. But Black Myth Wukong, very doable, 6 series cards for a very beautiful looking game. And Fluidmotion frames is fantastic. Just make sure you get your 99% low to 30, and you should have a wonderful experience with that. Anyway, I do say thank you. This is, again, a bit of a tech demo more so for my systems. I'd like to be one of those benchmarkers for you. I could tell you how to configure an Ali ROG or a Lenovo Legion Go or something, how to get your best settings, how to use an external GPU with one. The AMD Flip has the GPU link, the Oculus link, or something that allows you to get the full bandwidth of an external GPU if it's in an enclosure. I'm more than happy to do some guides for how to tweak or any of that sort of stuff. I don't own any of those portables though. I've got a paid-for channel. I do find that my videos don't get any recommendations by the channel if I mention any of the typical companies in my negative spiels. The metrics on YouTube just won't point towards me. I get that. I'm a conscientious consumer. I'm telling people, not advertising, and I'm certainly not bought out, and I'm certainly not a fanboy of a large corporation. Very, very much here for we the people. With that being said, though, I'm going to wish you well. I do say thank you for the investment, the gift of your time today to share with me. I would encourage, just leave a comment. If in a future video you want me to look at something or clarify a line of garbage I might have said, if I've been having you froth at the mouth because you buy Team Green's video cards, that everything I've said is just offensive to you because you feel that you know you've got the better product, that you've got a pro-consumer company, and that the red team are somehow the bastards holding gaming back. I don't know how people see that, but when the media is mostly owned by two corporations in the entertainment industry that certainly lead things in their favour, it can be very hard to find out the reality of these things. You know, I always make the joke that 9 out of 10 users buy NVIDIA cards. Well, it's not true at all. You look at the metrics and you actually find that AMD sell really well. When you talk the high-end card space and benchmarkers on the internet, it appears to be very different. And of course, there's always the fear of missing out and the keeping up with the Joneses and the strength in advertising of appearing that everybody's doing that. and that you know, nobody wants to go against that grain. And you never want your technician to be upset with you for buying a piece of technology. If you're the person you know who's the most capable with using a computer uses Apple's, and you go out and buy a Windows PC, right? You're a nightmare to them, and vice versa. You know, if they use Windows PCs and you buy an Apple, you're a nightmare to your tech supporter, right? Well, if your friends all own a particular console ecosystem, right, irrelevant of my advice about consumer ethics, right, you need to buy into that ecosystem. That's where all the people in your life are at. Right? The people in your life are more important than tech toys at the end of the day, and we should never let any consumer, the companies with the biggest advertising budgets, at the least honesty in their methods of revealing information and obfuscating facts. If we let them take our hand and guide us, right? If you've seen that movie Brave, right, they're going to lead us like a little mischievous imp out into a deep forest, and then they're just going to disappear, and they're just going to leave us there, and they're going to say, "Oh, here, you can buy a new card, and we'll guide you back to the happy road where there's light to see," right? It's ray tracing on that path out there. But for everyone else, it's not so silly as to take a complete random stranger's hand whose intentions we can't see. I can only hope that what comes across as a smile in my voice and an attitude towards positivity means that I make decisions in my life that follow those concepts, those mantras, modus operandi, ways of living, if you will, ways of being. So let's do it. Let's all just be happier. Let's watch videos like this casually. Let's not really care about a single frame here and there. Let's enjoy the concept of evolving technology and theories and ethics and all sorts of stuff. Let's enjoy a good conversation. Old saying, great minds talk about concepts, average minds talk about things, small minds talk about people. Sadly, any nature of any internet channel I'm going to do, it's not interesting to be the top category. I can't sit here and talk philosophy. All right? This is the gaming sections. I've got to talk about things. But while we're talking about things, let's have the fun of being a human being and just pointing our fingers at whatever it is that we're looking at and actually laughing, because it is all just too mad. The world is too silly, and if we take this stuff all just too seriously, or as seriously as the world wants us to take it, it's just like a hobby, doesn't it? So we're doing it for ourselves. Thank you very much for supporting me being here doing this. It's been a 6-minute long exit that I'm never going to do in another video. So that's it. We had fun. It was just time. But yeah, look, not knowing how to do an exit stage left politely when no one's looking, right, that would just be hitting the stop button right now. I'm just going to do one more. I wish you well with your day. May the videos that come your way after this one be filled with the information that you're seeking, and just put that smile on your dial just the way you're after. Or, you know, may whatever problems not problems, whatever projects you got going on, may they just all come together for you, right? And then you can go, oh yeah, that was well wishes from that dude on the net in the morning. So yeah, sure it is. No. Own your reality. You go make your destiny. And I'll sit here and I'll make another video of gaming at 60 frames a second at 4K. Alrighty, good day.